What would you do if someone looked at you and decided you didn't belong in a space you'd earned? If they treated your presence like a mistake that needed to be corrected? On what should have been a peaceful transcontinental flight, one woman's quiet dignity turned an act of brazen entitlement into a lesson that would echo through that aircraft and far beyond it. Stay tuned, this is a story of quiet power, shocking revelations, and the kind of karma that restores your faith in justice. If you think this is shocking already, wait until you hear who she really was. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the twist that changes everything. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of justice, courage, and resilience, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more stories that remind us. Respect isn't optional, it's essential. Now let's dive in. The soft hum of jet engines filled the cabin as Dr. Amara Bennett settled into seat 2A, first class, window side. She let out a slow breath, the kind that comes after months of exhaustion finally catching up with you. The leather seat cradled her like a well-deserved embrace. Outside the window, the tarmac shimmered under the late afternoon sun. This wasn't luck, this wasn't a gift. Amara had earned this seat with 14-hour shifts, sleepless nights in research labs, and a career built on brilliance and grit. A renowned cardiovascular surgeon and professor at Johns Hopkins, she just finished keynoting a medical conference in Los Angeles. Now she was headed home to Baltimore. She pulled out her tablet, adjusted her reading glasses, and opened a research paper on minimally invasive heart procedures. The cabin around her was calm. Muted conversations, the rustle of newspapers, the faint scent of expensive cologne and fresh coffee. It felt perfect. But perfection, as she would soon learn, could be fleeting. A sharp voice cut through the quiet. Excuse me, ma'am." Amara glanced up. A woman stood in the aisle, mid-40s, designer sunglasses perched on platinum blonde hair, oversized handbag dangling from one arm like a weapon of status. Her name, as Amara would later learn, was Patricia Colburn, venture capitalist, board member of 3 tech startups, and apparently someone who believed the world owed her preferential treatment. Patricia's eyes flicked over Amara, quick, dismissive, calculating. "I think there's been a mistake," Patricia said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This is seat 2A, my seat." Amara blinked, calm but firm. "No mistake, this is my seat, I have my boarding pass right here." She held up her phone showing the digital pass clearly marked, seat 2A, first class. Patricia didn't even look at it. "Well, I always sit in 2A, I'm a platinum member, there must have been some sort of mix-up." Her eyes lingered on Amara in a way that made the subtext impossible to miss. Amara's jaw tightened but her voice remained steady. "There's no mix-up, I booked this seat 3 weeks ago." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced around the cabin as if looking for backup, then raised her hand to flag down a flight attendant. "Excuse me, yes, hi, there's a seating issue here that needs to be resolved." The flight attendant arrived quickly, a young man named Derek, crisp uniform, polite smile. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Patricia gestured at Amara like she was pointing out a stain on the upholstery. "She's in my seat. I need this sorted out immediately." Derek turned to Amara, his smile still in place but a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Amara handed over her phone without a word. Derek scanned it, checked his tablet, scanned it again. "Ma'am," he said gently, looking at Patricia, "this passenger is correctly seated. Seat 2A was assigned to her at the time of booking." Patricia's face flushed. "That's impossible, I'm platinum, I always get 2A. "I understand, ma'am, but this seat was already assigned." "Then move her." The cabin went silent. Nearby passengers stopped mid-conversation. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. Even the flight attendant seemed to freeze for a moment, caught between protocol and the sheer audacity of what had just been said. Amara sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. But inside, something old and familiar stirred, the exhaustion of having to prove she belonged. Again. Derek cleared his throat. Ma'am, I can't do that. She has a confirmed seat, but I'd be happy to find you another first-class seat. I don't want another seat, I want this seat. Patricia's voice climbed. Do you know who I am? I've flown this airline for 15 years. I spend tens of thousands of dollars a year with you people. I understand, and we appreciate your loyalty. Then do something about it. Derek hesitated, his eyes flicked to Amara, apologetic, uncertain. And that hesitation said everything. Amara spoke, her voice low but cutting through the tension like a scalpel. I'm not moving. Patricia whipped around. Excuse me. I said I'm not moving. I paid for this seat. I'm entitled to this seat, and no amount of entitlement on your part is going to change that. The silence deepened. Patricia's eyes narrowed. This is ridiculous. Get me a supervisor now. Derek nodded quickly, grateful for an exit. Of course, let me get the lead attendant. He disappeared down the aisle. Amara returned her gaze to her tablet, though the words on the screen blurred. She'd been here before, not on a plane, but in boardrooms, in hospital staff meetings, in academic panels, places where her presence was questioned, her credentials doubted, her right to be there challenged by people who couldn't fathom that she'd earned it. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't going to smile politely and let it slide. If this part has you on edge, hit the like button right now. It lets us know you want more stories like this, and trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next. Moments later, a woman in a navy blazer approached Sharon, the lead flight attendant, early 50s, the kind of professional calm that comes from years of diffusing passenger meltdowns. Good afternoon, Sharon said smoothly. I understand there's a seating concern. Patricia launched in immediately. Yes, I'm platinum. I've been flying this route for over a decade. I always sit in 2A. She's in my seat and I want this resolved. Sharon glanced at Amara, then at her tablet. Ma'am, I see here that seat 2A was assigned to Dr. Bennett at the time of booking. Your reservation shows you in seat 4C, also in first class. 4C is a middle seat. It's an aisle seat, ma'am. I don't want an aisle seat. I want the window, my window. Sharon's smile remained, but her tone cooled slightly. I understand your preference, but this passenger has a confirmed reservation for this seat. I'm not able to reassign her. Patricia crossed her arms. Then upgrade me, I'll take a suite. There are no suites available on this aircraft, ma'am, but your seat in 4C is fully comparable. It's not comparable if it's not the seat I want. The passengers around them were no longer pretending not to listen. This was a spectacle now. Sharon took a breath. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to take your assigned seat so we can prepare for departure. And I'm going to have to ask you to do your job and accommodate a loyal customer. I am doing my job, and right now, that means ensuring all passengers are seated according to their boarding passes. Patricia's voice dropped, but the edge in it sharpened. You know what this looks like, don't you? You're choosing her over me because you're afraid of how it looks. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Amara's grip on her armrest tightened, but she didn't look up. She wouldn't give Patricia the satisfaction. Sharon's expression hardened. Ma'am, this has nothing to do with anything other than confirmed seat assignments. Now I'm going to ask you one more time to take your seat, or we'll need to discuss whether you'll be traveling on this flight at all. Patricia's eyes widened. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of airline policy. For a long, tense moment, Patricia stood there, her face flushed, her designer bag trembling in her grip. Then she spun on her heel and stormed down the aisle toward seat 4C, muttering loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Sharon turned to Amara, her voice softer now. I apologize for the disruption, Dr. Bennett. Is there anything I can get for you? Amara looked up, meeting her eyes. No, thank you. Sharon nodded and moved on. The cabin slowly returned to its pre-flight rhythm. Conversations resumed. Passengers shifted in their seats, but Amara could still feel the eyes on her, some sympathetic, some curious, some uncomfortable. She'd won, but it didn't feel like a victory. As the plane began to taxi, Amara stared out the window at the distant mountains, her reflection ghosted against the glass. She had faced moments like this before. In medical school, when a senior surgeon assumed she was a nurse and handed her a bedpan. In her first hospital position when a patient refused to let her operate because he wanted a real doctor. At conferences where colleagues assumed she was there for diversity optics, not because she'd published groundbreaking research. She'd learned to swallow it, to rise above it, to let her work speak for itself. But this time something was different. This time she wasn't backing down. Because Patricia Colburn had no idea who she was dealing with. And in a few short hours, the entire cabin and the world would find out. If you're hooked, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin had settled into that familiar rhythm of long-distance travel. The lights were dimmed, passengers dozed or watched movies on their screens. The hum of the engines was hypnotic, steady. Amara had finally allowed herself to relax. Her tablet lay face down on the tray table. A half-empty cup of tea had gone lukewarm beside it. Outside the window, the sky was a deepening blue somewhere over the Midwest now, chasing the sunset eastward. She closed her eyes, letting the tension from earlier drain away. And then, from the back of the cabin, came a sound that every doctor knows. A scream. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp and terrified in a way that cuts through everything else. Help, someone help. Amara's eyes snapped open. The cabin lights flickered on, passengers sat up, confused, alarmed, flight attendants rushed down the aisle toward the commotion. Amara was already unbuckling her seatbelt. By the time Amara reached row 18, a small crowd had gathered. A man in his 60s lay slumped in his seat, his face ashen, his breathing shallow and labored. His wife knelt in the aisle beside him, gripping his hand, her voice breaking. He said his chest hurt, he can't breathe, please someone help him. Derek, the flight attendant, was already there, his earlier politeness replaced by focused urgency. Sir, can you hear me, sir? No response. Sharon pushed through the crowd, her voice cutting through the panic. Does anyone on board have medical training? We need a doctor. I'm a doctor. The words came from behind them, calm and clear. Everyone turned. Amara stood at the edge of the aisle, her expression composed but her eyes already assessing the situation with the kind of precision that comes from years in operating rooms. Sharon's face flooded with relief. Thank God, please. Amara moved forward, her hands already reaching for the man's wrist to check his pulse. Weak, thready, his lips had a faint bluish tint, classic signs. He's having a heart attack, Amara said, her voice steady. We need to move him to a flat surface, now. The flight attendants moved immediately, clearing space in the galley area. 2 passengers helped lift the man gently from his seat and lay him down. His wife followed, sobbing quietly. Amara knelt beside him, her fingers pressed to his neck, counting. Pulse is weak and irregular, he's going into cardiac arrest. Sharon crouched beside her. We have an AED and a medical kit. Get them both, and I need someone to time compressions. Derek was already running. Amara tilted the man's head back, checked his airway, and positioned her hands over his chest. She looked up at Sharon. When I start compressions, I need you to stay calm and follow my instructions exactly, understand? Sharon nodded. Good. Amara locked her elbows and began chest compressions, steady, rhythmic, unrelenting. 1, 2, 3, 4. The cabin had gone silent except for the sound of Amara's counting and the man's wife weeping softly in the background. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 more. Derek returned with the AED and the medical kit. Amara didn't stop compressions. Open the AED, turn it on, attach the pads to his chest, 1 on the upper right, 1 on the lower left. Derek's hands shook slightly, but he followed her instructions. The AED powered on, its automated voice cutting through the tension. Analyzing heart rhythm, do not touch the patient. Amara pulled her hands back. Everyone held their breath. Shock advised, stand clear. Everyone back, Amara commanded. She pressed the shock button. The man's body jerked. The AED recalculated, continue CPR. Amara was back on his chest immediately, compressions resuming without missing a beat. Come on, she murmured, come on. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 more. The man's wife gripped Sharon's hand, her knuckles white. Please, please. And then a gasp. The man's eyes fluttered open. His chest began rising and falling on its own, shallow but steady. Amara checked his pulse, stronger now. She leaned back slightly, exhaling for the first time in minutes. He's stable, but we need to get him to a hospital as soon as possible. Sharon was already on the intercom. Captain, we have a medical emergency. We need an immediate diversion to the nearest airport. The captain's voice crackled back. Understood, we're rerouting to St. Louis ETA 12 minutes. Amara stayed beside the man, monitoring his vitals, her fingers pressed to his wrist. You're going to be okay, she told him softly, just stay with me. His wife collapsed onto Amara's shoulder, sobbing with relief. Thank you so much. Amara squeezed her hand. He's strong, he's going to make it. As the plane began its descent into St. Louis, the passengers who had witnessed the emergency slowly returned to their seats, murmuring to one another. Word spread quickly through the cabin. A doctor saved him. She brought him back. Did you see how calm she was? In seat 4C, Patricia Colburn sat rigid, her face pale, her designer sunglasses now perched uselessly on top of her head. She had watched the entire thing. And for the first time in a very long time, Patricia understood what it felt like to be small. When the paramedics boarded the plane in St. Louis and took over care of the patient, one of them, a young EMT with kind eyes, turned to Amara. You saved his life, ma'am, that was textbook. Amara smiled faintly, just doing my job. What's your name for our report? Dr. Amara Bennett, cardiovascular surgeon, Johns Hopkins. The EMT's eyes widened. Wait, Dr. Bennett, I've read your work. You pioneered that new valve repair technique. Amara nodded modestly. That's me. The EMT grinned. It's an honor, doctor. As the paramedics wheeled the man off the plane, Sharon approached Amara, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Bennett, I don't know how to thank you. You were incredible. I'm just glad I was here. Sharon hesitated, then glanced down the aisle toward Patricia's seat. Her expression hardened slightly. I think there are some people on this flight who owe you an apology. Amara followed her gaze. Patricia sat frozen, staring at nothing, her earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Amara shook her head gently. She doesn't owe me anything. Sharon looked surprised. Amara's voice was quiet but firm. I didn't do this for recognition, I did it because it was the right thing to do, that's all that matters. The plane took off again 20 minutes later, continuing its journey to Baltimore. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Passengers who had ignored Amara before now nodded respectfully as they passed her seat. A businessman in row 3 leaned over. That was remarkable, doctor, thank you for what you did. A mother traveling with her daughter stopped by. My little girl wants to be a doctor someday, seeing you, it meant everything. Amara smiled warmly at the child. Then study hard and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. The little girl beamed. But the most significant moment came an hour later, as the plane cruised smoothly toward the East Coast. Patricia Colburn stood up from her seat. She walked slowly down the aisle, her steps hesitant, her confidence shattered. She stopped at row 2. Amara looked up from her book, her expression neutral. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Her voice cracked, I owe you an apology. The cabin went quiet again, but this time the silence was different, expectant, watchful. Patricia's hands twisted together. What I said earlier, the way I acted, it was unacceptable, you didn't deserve that, and then you went and saved that man's life and she trailed off, her eyes glistening. I'm ashamed, truly. Amara studied her for a long moment. Then with measured grace she said, I accept your apology. Patricia let out a shaky breath. Thank you, I'm sorry. She turned to leave. Patricia. Patricia stopped, surprised that Amara knew her name. Amara's voice was steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. I hope you remember this moment, not because you were wrong about me, but because you made an assumption about someone based on how they looked, where they were sitting, and what you believed they deserved. That kind of thinking doesn't just hurt people, it blinds you to who they really are. Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face now. You're right, I'm so sorry. Then learn from it. Patricia nodded again and returned to her seat, smaller and quieter than she'd been in years. Amara returned to her book, but she could feel the shift in the cabin: respect, solidarity, justice, quiet and complete. Sharon appeared moments later with a handwritten note on airline stationery. "This is from the captain, he wanted you to have it." Amara unfolded the note. Dr. Bennett asterisk. "Thank you for your extraordinary professionalism and compassion today. You are a credit to your profession and a reminder of why we are honored to serve passengers like you. Your flight today and any future flight with us is complimentary. With deepest respect asterisk. Captain Michael Torres asterisk." Amara smiled softly and tucked the note into her bag. As the plane descended into Baltimore, the sun had fully set, and the city lights sparkled below like scattered diamonds. Amara looked out the window, her reflection ghosted once more against the glass. This wasn't about revenge, it never had been. It was about accountability. About showing people that respect isn't something you give when it's convenient, it's something you extend to every person in every space because their worth isn't determined by your assumptions. Real power doesn't demand attention, it doesn't shout or threaten or demean. It simply shows up, does the work, and lets actions speak louder than any argument ever could. Patricia had learned that today, so had everyone else on that flight. And maybe, just maybe, they'd carry that lesson with them. Because at 35,000 feet in a moment of crisis, it wasn't status or platinum memberships or designer handbags that mattered. It was skill, compassion, and the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly who they were and what they were capable of. Amara Bennett had never needed to prove she belonged in that seat. She'd simply shown the world why she'd earned it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that prove dignity, courage, and justice still matter. Because respect isn't a courtesy, it's a requirement. And real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never forget your worth.